expertise being shared and development being had in real time. So I appreciate every person that came, and I appreciate every person that's here. You feel me? So when it comes to it, shout out to RAP. RAP is a company, is an organization, a student-led organization by Harvard that I've been a client of, that provides contracts, legal consultation, and just giving better understanding of the business we're in, because we're in a business. If you create something out of nothing, you're in business, you're in the industry, because that's what the industry is, taking raw materials and turning it into something that can be, sold. So understand that the minute you make a song, the minute you record your voice, you just created a product, and that product needs to be protected. So these people on this panel right here are in the business of protecting that product, in the business of selling that product, in the business of growing and developing that product. So these are the people that you guys need to take an understanding from, because I tell people all the time, this is a business of all information. All business is information. You can take the information, do what you want, and make it how you want to make it. So organizations like RAP, people like the panelists here, me, Gil, we're all resources. And the way you utilize your resources determine your destiny and your fate. So really understand that we're in a powerful room right now. And thank you to each individual that's going to share this stage, each panelist that's going to give their knowledge. It does not go without gratitude. And thank you to RAP. Every artist here I know we're in a small market, so a lot of times people want to say, oh, you can't, oh, you can't, oh, you don't. But then we're in the same market that has a university that's older than America itself, and they have resources that are completely free at our disposal. We're sitting at a Harvard Law School class completely free with some people you can't pay to be with. So, understand, a lot of places just can't happen. A lot of places just can't happen. So be appreciative of what you have at your disposal and make something shake of it. So, like I said, one last time, shout out to RAP. Shout out to my partner Andrew and Landon, the co-president of RAP this year. And like I said, RAP has been an organization ran in Harvard for a while, and it's going to continue to be. So the same way I use them as a resource, I encourage you guys to shoot them an email for next semester. Shout out to Brian Price. And you know what I'm saying, shoot them an email next semester and see what you can do with them. Get your contracts right, understand the business you're in and understand the industry you're in so you can grow in it. And that's all it is. So thank you to the panelists. We're at the Hitmaker Symposium, Local Sound, Global Impact. And I'm going to pass it to the amazing Iffy who's going to lead this panel. And she can speak a lot better than I can. So thank you, Iffy.
Thank you, Rob, for that incredible opening. Literally couldn't have said it better myself. As he said, this symposium is being put on by the Recording Artist Project. We are a student practice organization, so for all of you artists, if you need help with anything, legal, business, please hit us up. Today we have an incredible panel ready for you guys to speak to local sounds and local impact. We're going to start off by giving you guys some context with their background, and we're going to answer some questions. Then we're going to open up the floor for some Q&A from you guys. Okay, let's get into the bios. So first we have Binta Brown, the founder of Oma Lily Projects, a full-scale talent management company. Binta Brown is the producer of the independent documentary Fly Like a Girl on Hulu, a partner in independent studio in the Atlantic, and has represented a roster of music and TV personalities that include Hannibal Buress, Vic Mensa, and Chance the Rapper. The former head of operations at Keep Cool/RCA Records, Binta has been listed on Billboard's Women in Music list, Hip Hop Power Players, as a Fortune 40 under 40 business leader, and on Roots 100 Most Influential African Americans list. She's on faculty at NYU Tisch School of the Arts, Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music. We also have Muyiwa Awuni. He is a highly regarded executive in the music industry, known for his expertise in talent management and the production of music and videos. He currently serves as the manager for Thames, Blackout Beats, and Deeds Art. Yeah, y'all didn't clap when I said Thames. And he has previously managed notable figures such as Esperanto Amahi. Muyi was also the CEO of the BSB agency, a talent management company he founded. Muyi has gained significant recognition for his contributions to the music industry. He was named one of the top 10 African music executives to watch at the beginning of 2022, and one of the top 30 executives in the first half of the year. He was also featured on Billboard's Managers to Watch article. Next up, we have Rayan Falalji. Rayan has proven himself as a skilled artist manager with his client Red Veil, where he has been responsible for overseeing his client's overall career and business growth through strategic planning, marketing, creative direction, partnerships, and data analytics. He has achieved impressive results, including growing total music streaming numbers across all platforms from below 10,000 to over 100 million streams in just over 2 years, and helping his client's annual income increase by 10 times in 2 years. Rayan has also directly aided in his client's creative direction in songs, music videos, cover art, marketing plans, merchandise designs, rollouts, and many more. It's a long list. While utilizing streaming and social media, data analytics to develop strategies that contribute to overall career growth. Last up, we have Matthew Adesuyan. Matthew is the co-founder of Bad Habit, an imprint of Atlantic Records. If you are an African fan like me, you know who he is. Through Bad Habit, Matthew has managed and released music for an impressive artist roster, including Grammy Award-winning Nigerian artist Burna Boy, as well as critically acclaimed acts such as The Neighborhood, Umi, and Meek. Matthew attended Morehouse College and Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, where he studied business administration. Please give a round of applause to the amazing panelists. So truly, I know that your bios probably just scratched the surface, and we are all so interested in hearing more about you guys and what your journey has looked like to get you to the point where you are today in your careers. Matthew, if you'd like to start, and we can just go down the panel.
So what it took to get here? I think I've always just used music as a way to understand the world around me. And I just couldn't see a life where music wasn't the most important thing in what I do, how I understand culture and other people, and how the world works. So the kind of artists that we've always tried to work with are ones who look at the world as an opportunity to make it better. And the art they make is out there to make it better, to create a conversation that makes the next person make it better. So I think when we look for artists as a company or myself, still like being that kid that was like 12 years old on SoundCloud, trying to make a playlist of artists nobody else knows and be inspired by them. So we're trying to like kind of constantly have that energy behind everything that we do, everybody that we work with. So yeah, I think I've just been constantly inspired by music and art and entertainment, how it shifts culture and how it shifts the way people think globally. So, you know, one kid from Boston can make the whole world change a little bit. So, yeah, that's kind of how that.
Hello everyone. For me personally, my story was kind of different. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, where it wasn't cool to do anything musical. As you can imagine, your parents want you to be a lawyer, a doctor, something they can brag about with their friends, right? But when I was in school, music was my escape from everything I hated around me, because school was boring. This is how I was. But for me personally, school was just not it, and I felt caged. But music was that liberator for me. And then randomly I just started delving into creative things like selling clothes and doing events, etc. And due to the network I built organically, one artist said I should manage them. And that was it. I fell in love with community building, branding, understanding how music makes people feel, even understanding that human beings are tonal creatures first before we're creatures of understanding. So we react to tones before we even understand English. So all of that has literally made me where I am just by following what's true to what I believe is liberation. So yeah.
Hi everyone. For me, I would say it started when I was really young. My oldest brother was kind of teaching me stuff. Like he taught me how to bring CDs into iTunes when I was really young. Obviously, kind of doesn't exist anymore. But that, and then he bought me my first DSP subscription when I was in elementary school. And I had just always really loved music growing up. But what had sort of brought me into it directly was I was doing photography, and I started taking photos at concerts. And when I was doing that, I kind of started to meet artist managers, publicists, promoters. So I started seeing this whole like industry, and that there's so much that you could do in it. And I didn't really know that that existed prior to that. And from there, it was just like really wanting to learn everything, meet people, kind of like what you guys are doing now. But yeah, I think that's sort of where it started, and just kept going on into management. Yeah.
Y'all don't have to clap when I release it. I just want to relieve you of that obligation. In terms of my journey is unorthodox, I think, for most contemporary artist managers. But my hope is that it won't remain unorthodox. I grew up, like all of these folks here, loving music. Music is my first language, it's my last language. I loved it so much that I ended up studying 11 different instruments, learning to play them with some proficiency. And as I was looking at career paths, I wanted to be like Clive Davis or Walter Yetnikoff or any of the other great or formerly very well-known executives in the business. And the thing that I noticed about each of them is that they had law degrees. And so I was under the impression that in order to become an executive in the music business, it would be very helpful to not just have a deep love of music, but also to have a law degree. And so my interest in the law went beyond music and contracts. I have a deep and profound love of justice and fighting for the rights of others. And a deep appreciation for the consequences of those who fought for rights so that I could have the opportunity to be here, that all of us who are here could have the opportunity to be here at Harvard talking about music, which is the thing more than anything else that shapes our culture and our relationships, our connections with one another. In any event, so I went to law school. I went to Columbia Law School. Harvard deferred me a year. They didn't think that was cool. And I was like, screw you. Columbia.
I'll show you one.
It worked out. It's worked out really well. I can't complain. And went to law school. I started my career at a firm called Paradisee. Those of you who are law students or even business students in the room are more likely than not, I hope, familiar with Cravath. Cravath, at least at the time, represented most of the biggest entertainment companies in the world. And so that was an extraordinary experience for me. I worked on massive mergers and acquisitions. I put together the board of what was then known as Time Warner, which was at the time one of the biggest media and entertainment companies in the world. I broke up the company DreamWorks, which was a film company, and spun one of those companies off, and I helped take a lot of companies public. And it was an amazing experience. One thing led to the next. I made a partner at another law firm called Kirkland & Ellis. My father, after a few years of that, pulled me aside and said, "What are you doing?" I thought that he wanted to work in the music business and the entertainment business. And I said, "I do." And he said, "Well, why don't you quit your job and start your own company?" Which was very scary because I had all of the benefits and income of a partner in a major global law firm. And he said to me, you will fail and you will fail miserably, but your mother and I will be here to support you when you do, and you'll figure it out. He said that you have to put one foot in front of the other and give it a shot. And so one thing, again, led to the next. I ended up working with an artist, somehow ended up getting involved with the social experiment guys to support that particular artist. Then they're like, move out to Chicago. I moved out to Chicago. I ended up doing what I did with Chance for a few years, and that's how I got here. So it's been a long and winding journey, but well worth it. And for those of you who are law students here, I would encourage you to take your studies very seriously, because I do believe very firmly that having a law degree has been extraordinarily helpful to me.
So Benta, you spoke a little bit about the thought process you had before you decided to take a leap of faith into the music/entertainment industry. Can you also speak to your decision-making process as an artist manager, and can our other panelists also elaborate on that as well?
When you say my decision-making process as an artist manager,
When it comes to decisions about your artists.
oh, I don't make decisions without having conversations with my artists. You know, our jobs are to be advisors and advocates, but not necessarily deciders. I think, at least for me, and with the artists with my work, if I'm running around making decisions without consulting my artists, then I can't properly represent them. What I tend to do is the same thing I did as a lawyer, which is I come up with a strategy, with a method. I recommend the strategy to our artists. We discuss it. They push back. I push back. They push back. I push back some more. We get to something that feels like it's going to work. And I think it requires, as an advisor, it requires a lot of patience, and also requires the humility to understand that there are going to be times when your client, when your artist says, I don't want to do it that way. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes it means that you might not be a particularly good mix, right? Because there are some things that are just so obvious. But other times it's a really critical and crucial time for me as a manager to learn and to listen. So I don't make decisions for my artists. We make decisions together. I try to create an atmosphere where it's mutually beneficial. We're each other's partners. I don't win if my artist isn't winning, and if my artist is losing, then I'm definitely losing. So we have to be in simpatico.
Louis, what would you also like to speak to this?
Yes, so the word I like to use is alignment, right? If, for example, you're trying to release music and your artist has a particular way they want to do it from their creative standpoint, which is very much valuable because at the end of the day it's their art, it's also important to tell them things that they may not know as a result of what your expertise is. And that's when the conversation starts to happen. So, for example, I remember when we wanted to shoot a video that never came out with Thames, and the idea was basically impossible. I had to basically speak to us to how we can make this possible, but at the same time we have to cut down some things, which was sad about, but at the end of the day, we got what we wanted to do, right? So like Winter said, it's really a communication thing between managers and artists, because at the end of the day, the job of the artist is to make the music, the job of the manager is to market, sell, brand, and push music out. So it's very important that everyone's on the same page before the release. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Ray or Matthew?
I think for me, there's like two sides of it. There's like the part where you kind of want to be so entrenched within the artist's mindset where you can answer like basic questions without having to get too deep into it. Especially like, let's say the Neighborhood. When they first came out, they were specific about everything they wanted to do was black and white. We got Jimmy Fallon offered. They said that they want to see the game in black and white. If they can't be in black and white, they won't do it. So there was a clear line in the sand from before when we even started having conversations like this is the way we want to do it. We didn't end up in Jimmy Fallon, ended up in Jimmy Kimmel. But it was like that understanding that they have a vision, we're gonna execute the vision from the beginning to the end. And if you don't align with that, then like you said, you know, there's that clear understanding. In other cases, it's a bit more of a battle, and it is that understanding of following. Sometimes you gotta follow crazy, because like Burna is very intuitive, like naturally. So I know for this last album, we had a whole different single, a whole different rollout set up, and he pressed me every day. Like the last has to be the first song. I refuse to start this album rollout without that song being the first song to set the tone. And there was a lot of things that were uphill battle. Clearance of Toni Braxton, and she had a passing the family, so getting in touch with her as basically impossible. We had an announcement set with the cover of Billboard that was coming up in 2.5 weeks. He was about to do the Billboard Music Award show, and he wanted to perform that song that was not out yet, that was not clear. But he was specific. And when someone is that specific, you kind of have to follow that energy. Especially with artists, they have like that sensitivity to the world around them and what they are and what they want to put out there. And sometimes you gotta, like I said, you follow crazy. And I did everything, the team did everything to get that clearance done. And obviously that one kind of changed everything for our trajectory for the rest of the year. So I think there's times where you really gotta like be aligned with an artist's mindset, their vision, and their voice. And sometimes you gotta be the one that brings like sanity into it and be like, yo, this is damn near impossible or it's impossible. But you know, that's the thing about being in the creative world, you can sometimes make impossible things possible. So it's been, yeah, it's a journey for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what everybody's saying is great. I think for me, I kind of see it as like the artist is like the quarterback and I'm the coach. And I can take timeouts, I can run play, or I can write down plays for them to do. But at the end of the day, they're going to choose whether they want to listen or not because they're on the field. I'm only on the sidelines. So there's definitely been times where I've seen something for Rail and he doesn't see it like, that's not me. But at the end of the day, it's your job to sort of bring a different perspective and make them try and think of things from a different way. Because sometimes they're going to not see things that you see for them, and that's because they're kind of in the driver's seat, and obviously you can have more of a bird's eye view as a manager. But most importantly, I think, one thing I've learned is you kind of got to let them fall on their face sometimes. Because even, you know, it's good to follow crazy, like Matthew said, but, and it's also going to bring sanity into it, but if they're really entrenched in something and you're really sort of on the other side, and you guys are just gonna have that disagreement, there's only so much back and forth you can have until like, I really want to do it this way. And you can let them do it that way, and it might not work out, but then afterwards they'll be like, oh, you're right, and come back to you. And, you know, that's kind of another thing, another sort of aspect of artist-manager relationships is, it's a developed trust over time. I mean, obviously it's a very tight-knit relationship, but that, you know, if he falls on his face 1, 2, 3 times, the next time it's gonna be like, oh, maybe I should just listen to you, even though I don't feel it in my gut. But yeah, you gotta kind of let them do what they do, and you can advise them, but obviously you can't make decisions for them. And it's also their art, and artists are just naturally like kind of sensitive, introverted people, and you can't really tell someone else what their vision is. At the end of the day, it's theirs, and kind of just gotta let them do what they do, even if you really, because there has been a lot of times where I'm like, I really think, you know, you should make this song sound this way, or I'm like, I think we should go with this version of the cover art, or we should roll it out this way. And he's like, no, I really want to do it this way. And there's been times where I've been right, or he's been right. So it's sort of just, you know, having open-minded communication and sort of letting the road sort of like pave itself in a way, because as long as he's not doing something that's gonna absolutely like tank his career, like I'm gonna drop a country song tomorrow as a rapper, then I'm not gonna be like, no, like absolutely. Then I would intervene in that case. But if it's like I wanna make this hi-hat sound this way, I'm gonna be like, okay, that's your choice. But yeah, that's sort of how I personally.
So Rayan, you speak to this idea of trust between you and your artists. How do you also establish trust between your artists and the rest of their team? And how do you build a reliable team around your artists?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for our team specifically, it's been a lot of people who we've just known for a long time, and that they've just kind of built onto itself organically. For example, like our agent, I had known him since before Bill really was trying to get books for stuff, and when Bill had momentum, he was kind of interested. But people like our creative director, him, Bill had known each other since they were like 13 years old. So to me, it's about just organic relationships and not really rushing in to get another person in the team, because sometimes, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. But yeah, I think that's how I sort of approach it. And sometimes you do need a person to help you, and you don't really know them off top. But it's sort of just like another thing of, for example, like we started working with publicists last year, and I hadn't really worked with publicists before, and I hadn't really known this guy, but sort of just taking things slow with them and seeing how they do, and if it's a good fit, it's a good fit, and if it's not, it's no hard feelings.
And I'm curious if any of our other panelists have thoughts around building a reliable team around your artists or any experiences you might have had.
Yeah.
So,
I'll go after you.
okay, so in terms of team building, right, it's really a thing of scaling. So when we started, we were just 3. So that was me and my co-manager Wale and Thames, and that was enough for that time. And then we had something called Training that did really well. And then we said, okay, we need a videographer, okay, we need a photographer, okay, we need a stylist, and that was okay for them. And the selection process was basically, first of all, how well do we connect? How easy do you flow? What's the energy when we're together? Is there love? Is there trust? Is there a level of understanding? Is there communication? And then obviously your expertise. How well are you at what you do? And then, like you said, as we expanded, we started to get people like publicists as well, PR people as well, agents as well. And what we did was basically what we did at the beginning, which is how good does this feel, and how good are you at your job? And as you scale and as you get bigger, I think that's a very good, compass to use in terms of building your team. So that's what I'll say.
So what I would add to that is, so as trust as between my fellow team members is about treating one another equitably, right? So I co-manage Vic and Joy Perk with Keezy, who's a studio owner, manager, and entrepreneur in Chicago. And we split everything straight down the middle, right? We don't play the game of you brought this in, you're doing it like we quarterback everything together, right? So by treating each other fairly, so for example, late last night, we were going through the books, and we were going through all of the revenues that were brought in, and how we're gonna split it up. And we're honest with each other. Transparency, communication, and treating people equitably is incredibly important. And that same thing extends to the other professionals who we bring in, whether it's attorneys, legal counsel, publicists, agents, labels at a certain point. It's really about communicating well, being transparent, sharing information, and not withholding information. If you find yourself in a position where you think you have to withhold information, then I think you have to ask yourself if the relationships make sense, right? Because as soon as you are in that position, you're gonna, it's, you start to, people become suspicious because people always know that there's something that's not being shared, right? So, and that's for everybody, it's just human nature. So I think that transparency, good communication, sharing information in a timely way with folks, letting people know as soon as things have changed, and just being honest about the money. And then when it comes to the other professionals you bring in, making sure that you're paying those people as well, right? I think a lot of distrust is caused in this business by people not paying each other on time, and paying each other equitably. So for me, that's just kind of like the thing. The only other thing that I would add to that, and to what has been said so far, is that it helps to have alignment in your values, right? So if you work with somebody who has fundamentally different values from you, you may not be able to work together for very long, right? So trust is sometimes a function of being able to, you're coming from the same place in terms of what you want to achieve, what your goals are, and what motivates you. So those are just for me have been things that I've learned along the way and that have been very helpful. And maybe next year I'll have something different to say. Who knows?
Thank you. And so, taking this in a slightly different direction, can you guys speak to how an artist's identity factors into their brand and music making, and how you take that into consideration in their creative process?
I think a lot comes with that. I think an artist's identity is it's so much of it comes from self, and so much it comes from a vision that they have for themselves, that you really need to be aligned with that. Understanding who they want to be and what they want to represent to the world is kind of the basis point of the relationship between the two of you. I'm talking about the and the artist. And how that then goes into their brand and goes into music and everything. I think we work in two businesses that cross. We work in the arts business and we work in the entertainment business. And the arts business is the artist, that's their identity, that's them being reflective, being in this world and saying, this is my story, this is the story I want to tell, this is how I see the world at this moment in time. But the entertainment business is, who's listening to this? Who's going to the shows? Who's being inspired by this? Who are you speaking to? And it usually starts at a niche level, but you want that niche level to grow into, I want a baby to listen to it, I want his grandma to listen to it. And both find different ways of being entertained by it. To be able to constantly be aware of that, the identity is basically the artist's mission statement. So you always look back at their identity as like, all right, this is our bottom line, this is like what we're trying to achieve. But everything else, like building a brand and how that affects the music, that starts to become like way more into marketing. Marketing is a bit psychological, and then part of it is, staying true to again your mission statement. So it's a process, it's a battle, and it's like a constant. That's a deep question, because it's like, I guess that's the whole business that you're dealing with every single day. It's like, are we making the right music? Are we promoting the right music? Are we staying true to your values? Are we staying true to your identity? Are we growing? Are we getting to the next stage? Is your identity changing? Is what you're just going to represent as an artist or as a brand? Is that changing? Is that growing? So, it's interesting. It's constant. I think that part is constantly changing. But I think that understanding the artist's identity is the core value of the relationship, and it's like a mission statement. And then finding out where art and entertainment meets within that is just a constant process, a constant evolution. It's, you don't want your first album, your 10th album to sound the same in most cases. So there's so much that happens in between.
Just as what Matthew said, I think it's very important that artists really work on self-development. Because even when you're talking about building a brand, it's very obvious when you say you're something, or it's obvious you're not that thing. And that's because you actually haven't worked on yourself to know yourself. I also feel once you do that, you also realize that there's room to grow as a human being. Because the truth is this, branding is just the ability to convince you that I say I am what I say I am. That's branding, right? And marketing is just creating strategies around that to facilitate that storytelling. I was speaking to Matthew off the grid, and I was basically saying how your celebrity is your marketing tool nowadays, because whatever video you put on your stories is what the blogs are going to take, right? And in order to actually build a brand that is interesting enough, you actually have to be interesting. But the way to be interesting is to be vulnerable. because you connect through vulnerability. And if you notice, most artists, their biggest songs are their most vulnerable songs, whether it's Whiskey with Joe Legba, whether it's Burn Out Last Stars, whether it's Thames Free Mind. And the truth is, you can craft your brand identity from that. Because with Thames, when we released Try Me, the whole brand that she carried was that brand of, overcoming basically, which till today is still the message. So I feel self-development is very, very important within an artist. And as a manager, I feel it's very important for you to keep studying the artist and studying the scale at which the artist has to live in, you understand? Because the music industry is very, very complicated, and like you said, artists are very introverted. So it's very hard for them to really come out of the shell and be like, this is who I am. So it's the job of the team to really take care of the mind of the artist so that they can be their best selves, and as a result, the whole branding and marketing thing is just a teamwork thing of just being true to yourself. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think drawing off that point, that self-development is so fundamental. I think Vela has sort of made his artistry just a reflection of himself and his music, and the stuff he wears, the marketing, but all of that is just true to him, and that's why I think, when we're sort of working on creative stuff together, I can suggest an idea, he can be like, oh, I like that, because it's true to him. I'm not suggesting like some random thing that, will make him look cool, quote unquote, because it has like some big industry cosign. But more on self-development, I think, he finished this last album, Learn to Swim, and he released it. And he was like, I was wanting to work on an album after this night. I don't know if I do anymore. And I was just like, maybe you just need to go out and live some more, experience life. And he's in India right now, first time overseas, so he's definitely like, he just texted me like a few days ago, saying, wow, I think I have a new album concept. And yeah, I just, whether it's, heartbreak or falling in love or whatever, it's, he's 18 years old, there's so much life to live for the both of us, and that's just gonna shape his music. I remember one of my mentors told me a story about an artist he worked with that, it took him 2 years or so to finish an album, and then after he released that album, he made like 3 albums in a month after that he all released. And I asked him like, how did he do it? He just lived. And I think like on the surface level, it's like, you just live. Like, yeah, I do that every day. But kind of what you were saying about artist vulnerability, it's the living that makes them want to write and try and articulate how they're feeling and how they're growing and what current state they're in. And sometimes that state is the same as the last album, or it's different, but sort of just allowing them to express what they want to express. Because like we were saying, they're, artists are introverted and they are so articulate and like well-spoken, and just there's so much going on there, but to get them to show that to people is really difficult sometimes. And sometimes going back to what we were saying about decision making, it's really being like, I think this is a really good record. I know it's vulnerable, you might not work out, but I think people resonate with it. And it's even like him sending me a demo and then him being like worried about it because he thinks like it's like not that good. And me being like, this is some of the best writing you've shown me. So yeah, and artists are just like unsure of themselves sometimes, and they just need that affirmation to release their best work. So I think everybody made some really good points.
I would just add that artists are people like all of us, and that what makes an artist different from the 4 of us who are sitting here, the 5 of us who are sitting here, is that they choose art as a vehicle for their self-expression, and as a vehicle for their ability to comment on the world around them and how they feel the world around them. There are some artists who do not know who they are, and so they have more difficulty expressing themselves and translating the pain and joy of human existence. There are artists who have a very deep and profound understanding of themselves, but may not necessarily know where their market is. And, you know, our job is to work with the artists to, and first of all, I try to work with artists who have a very deep understanding of who they are. Because it's very difficult. I can't tell somebody who they are, they need to discover that for themselves. And working with somebody who knows who they are, and who is skilled at being able to express that in a way that creates a sense of connection, a sense of community. Our job is to figure out how to effectively market that and connect with audiences and define those audiences wherever they may be. And to put together plans that support the capacity of the artists to continue to further express themselves. One last note, and that's just this, that some artists don't do their own songwriting and production. It's more common today than it was maybe 20 years ago, but you know, 25, 30 years ago, the biggest artists in the
That's the
world.
only way Motown, like,
Yeah.
Eric Gordy gonna make the record and say, who sings the best, you know, the Robert Gay,
Exactly. They weren't.
Michael Jackson, let's see which one of y'all gonna run it.
Right, they weren't writing their own, and I actually think that there's some artists who benefit from using songs that are written for them, to be totally honest, because they too need the help in order to express what it is that you want to express. Like, we can't forget about songwriters. Songwriters are so incredibly important. And they do a service too in helping to translate our thoughts, emotions, and feelings. And so, but then the job of a manager, particularly if you're a manager of an independent artist, or even when you are a manager of a signed artist, is to help find songs that make sense for your particular artist. You know, like people send me songs all the time, and I'm like, well, that wouldn't make any sense for any of my guys. You know, like that would be crazy. Why would you even send that to me? I actually yell at people when they're so off base. But you know, sometimes people send something, and I'm like, that's kind of dope. You know, sometimes people send a beat, I'll hear a random beat come from someone, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I bet that so and so artist on my roster could really use this. Maybe make something great out of it.
Because I think with music artists, because artists is like, anybody can be an artist, a doctor can be an artist, and you know, anything can be an artist. But as a music artist, you're also you're a vessel for a message, constantly. So even if you're not the one writing the song, you're the person standing behind the song that's making that song have meaning and a deeper connection beyond just the words on a piece of paper or the melody. And it's the delivery, and I think that goes into the entertainment part of it too. Like it just a music artist they stand alone. Like everything is on the back. They're the director, they're the main actor, they're the side actors. Like the whole vision is on them. So they have a lot more pressure than I think any kind of art form out there, because it's all about them and their face and their voice standing behind everything that they're creating constantly. So yeah, at times it's nice to have songs that they can connect with, because their job isn't just making the song. Their job is standing behind the song, being the deliverer of the message, going out there performing the song, going out there when their life is fucked up, but use that song to make your life better. They're sitting doing 30 shows in a row for 2 months, and they're doing that for people who are affected by the art. So yeah, there's so many pieces of the puzzle, and so many ways that the pie gets divvied up in terms of the creative process that it's kind of hard to let the artist divvy up. Because you didn't write a song, it's less, or than it's maybe without them performing the song would never have any value, because they're the person that can actually bring the life to that moment, into that idea, and that story that was written. So yeah, music artists are kind of a whole different set and standard of artists across.
It's also like very hard to humanize them, because they're literally embodiment of art in physical form. You see them on TV and forget that they probably had a bad night, the night before the show, and you expect them to perform, you expect them because this is what they told you they were in the song. And then it's a rinse and repeat process, so you can also feel mundane sometimes for them, which is why it's very important to live. It's very important to have new experiences, so that even within what feels repetitive, you have new things to be excited about, and that translates into your growth. So yeah, fundamentally self-awareness, because even artists getting songs to sing that aren't theirs, it requires you to know that, yo, this is my bag, like this is what I do. There's some artists that are more authentic to their craft and more attached to their work. So it's more like, no, I must write everything, I must produce everything, I must engineer everything. I am him, I am her. That's some artists. But at the end of the day, it's really knowing yourself and your team being open to who that person is and working with that person to a point where they feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable enough to be the artist they need to be for the public. So yeah.
Awesome. And then can you guys also speak to how where your artist is located regionally also plays into their storytelling and their authenticity?
Yeah, I'll talk about Vic a little bit. So Vic is from Chicago, Southside Chicago, and he's also Canadian. And I don't want to say too much about his album that's coming out, but you're going to hear a lot of that those joint influences in the project. I really, sorry, I get emotional. I really love what he's created. I think he's created some of his best work. Sorry. I didn't say that. He's really focused on bridging the diaspora and the continent. And he's been spending a lot of time in Ghana, making music with Ghanaians, and really thinking about the relationship between the South Side of Chicago and Accra, and what it is to be a Black American on the South Side of Chicago, with all of the different injustices and different things you're exposed to. And then also what it is to be in Accra, where everybody's Black, and you're surrounded by, it's not the same thing as it is when you're Black in the United States. And so, he explores some of that. He explores in his music, he explores what's in his heart, what's on his mind, what's happening, thinking about what's happening in the world from a political perspective. But yeah, the location is, to me, for an artist like Vic, really essential to his work. For some of my other artists, it's not essential in the same way. They are not wrestling with the differences between, what it is so absorbed in one community versus another community. They're wrestling with other things, and so maybe place becomes something different for them than a territory, a physical territory. Maybe it's a mental space that they're exploring, or maybe it's different colors or different hues that they're exploring, or just different experiences, right? We should be flexible in terms of what we think about when we say, what is your region, what is your space, what is your land? Because that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. But I think that identity and location when it comes to an artist like Vic it's like right there. So.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on everything you said. So for me personally, the way I see location is nature and nurture, right? Artists are inspired by the things around them and the life that they live in, the environment that they're in. And I'm coming from Lagos, Nigeria, so anybody that knows anything about Lagos, it's tough, right? But it's interesting because regardless of how tough it is, people take different things to inspire them, and as a result, make music off the back of what is true to their experience in Lagos. For example, I'll use Whiskey, who is a very good friend of mine. He's frustrated, right? But he uses his music as an escape to make people dance. Then you have an artist like Burner, who is more telling you how bad the government is, DTC. Then you have an artist like Thames, who is basically saying, look, at this point in time, I'm tired, you guys, or even if you guys are trying to do this, I'm not going to let you guys do this, So different people have different ways in which they approach, their process, but the location is primarily what gives the artist the inspiration to actually, produce art. So I feel it's quite important where you are, because the music sense is making now is completely different from the music that she made then. And that's because she's in some hill in LA. Before, she was in some room in Lagos where there was no lights, and she has to use a torchlight sometimes to fix wires and stuff. So location definitely plays a part in terms of the artists I've worked with. So that's what
I would say inspiration and also response, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully everybody here is aware of the extract 16 shots. You know, that was a response to something that happened in Chicago where the police shot a man 16 times, right? It's a really powerful and important track. It also caused him, you know, we have to be careful when the police are too close by because I think they're still angry on the song. But that's part of the power of great art, is to be able to respond to the environment and the place that you find yourself in.
reflect time.
Yeah, I mean, across, so our roster that had it spans a bunch of different artists. So he is Filipino, but he grew up from Jersey, Florida, and California. Umi's half black, half Japanese, but she's from Seattle. Berna is full-on African, Nigerian. But then even behind his scenes, his mother was Yoruba, his father is Igbo, and father's actually from River State, so he's like a whole different kind of Igbo. You know what I'm saying? So even that behind the scenes is his own cultural dynamics. But then he grew up with a worldview, like his mom speaks 7 languages and took him to Paris when he was 7 years old. Even G over here, he's from the Bay, and also went to college in New Orleans, and now we're actually working on his next album, and we're going through the track list, and it's like, wait, hold up, where's our true moment to the Bay, and like making sure that we're making, like, again, it's like that identity conversation where that's the mission statement. It's like, are we sticking to the mission statement? Are we sticking to like what's true to the artist's core? And a lot of times where you're from and who you're inspired by or the environments you're in are very much part of that core understanding of the kind of music and the kind of art you're trying to put out there. But then along the way, you're figuring yourself out. Like with Umi, she grew up with just her mom raising her in Seattle like her mom's from Japan. So she speaks Japanese fluently, writes in Japanese, goes to Tokyo all the time. Her father is African American and doesn't have that same kind of relationship with him. She moves to LA, goes to college, goes to USC. All of a sudden, the only people that are coming up to you are like, "Do you want to join the Black Student Union?" Or "Do you want to," you know what I'm saying? And she had to go through this process of re-identifying herself as, "Oh, I'm also a Black person," because she grew up so Japanese and in Seattle in like a more kind of situation where she was very much a minority. So that she went through a whole process on this last album, like understanding her Blackness as much as she already understood her Japanese side, or already understood, her feminine side. So it's a constant like, is that where you're from is like a basis point of who you are and what you are. Is the part of just like self-identity development. I guess to go back to artist development again. It's just like as an artist who goes through time, anybody goes through time. You're understanding yourself more, you're understanding your history more, your culture more, your parents more, what you fuck with, what you don't fuck with, how all those things are.
I think it's very rare I meet an artist that doesn't have a super eclectic music taste. I'll do some artist friends sometimes, and they'll start playing like Britney Spears or some crazy like old stuff. I'm like, what? Like, I would not really listen to that. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that speaks to where an artist is from. Where they're from, obviously there's the city's culture, but it's who they're growing up around. Redfield, for example, he grew up with his brothers who were showing him his sort of newer musical influences like Future, but then he has his mom who's playing like gospel music and old stuff, and he has his dad who's playing 90s rap. And it's just, I think artists, they draw from so much around them, they take a little piece of everything. And it's, even, I think a lot of artists, for example, they are very influenced by where they come from directly, but you know, some artists, where they're from, you know, they might not have had the best relationship with it, and they sort of want to speak about their, I guess, distaste for where they're from or their relationship with that. So although artists can really value where they're from, they can also have the 180-degree relationship with that. And I think, back to what you were saying about nature versus nurture, obviously there's things where you grow up that are just sort of gonna influence you. You know, for example, Vale really likes really loud bass in his songs, but he also really likes jazz chords because that's what his parents would have listened to growing up. So he likes fusing those two elements together. And obviously part of that is his parents showing him jazz music, but then the bass is just pure DMV music. Everything he shows me just like makes the speakers clip. So yeah, I think I don't think location is just purely geographic. I think it encompasses so much more.
As a bassist myself, I appreciate that.
So I'm going to give you guys a somewhat vague question, and you can take it any direction you want. Can you speak to some of the challenges that come with being a music, or actually rather just being in the music industry, and also specifically with your positions?
I mean, the challenges are endless. We're at war.
This is on the record.
I mean, that's how I look at it. Like, every day is a battle, and in the moment, I'm positive, some positive, I'm negative way. But yeah, I feel like there's so many challenges. I couldn't even know where to start. Again, like, for me, I have a different position than everybody else. So that habit is like, we have a record label, we have a management side, we also do distribution. So I always think of management as like you're a part of the 360 of the artist's career. There's not a part of the business, a part of their life, anything that you are not directly involved with. Whether it's being the therapist, being the best friend, being a lawyer, being a mom, being a dad, you know, being bodyguard, being, you know, you're anything and everything the artist needs at any time. When you're the label, I see it like more you're like about 120 degrees of the pop. You know, you're not the publisher, you're not touring, you're focused on the records, marketing the records, getting out and out. So those all have different battles and different challenges. I mean, like just clearing a record, like I said, the last like honestly had not a lot of different outside powers got involved with that song could have taken a year to do. And that's just one song. And imagine you have 10 songs on an album. I don't know how Kanye does it. Honestly, like, I'm pretty sure they just put out, there's probably songs from 2010 that included it because it's just so much to it. Or, you know, right now we made a song and we come to find out that the song that we sampled for that song is in contention, which means that a 30-year-old song has a bunch of money that it's made and it's just been piling up and nobody is allowed to touch it because, you know, rather than saying right now, a song's 100% published and they're 150% worth of it. I was right, so one person says they think they deserve 50%, another person says they think they deserve 50%, another person says they think they deserve 50%. There's only 100% to be divvied up. So now we can't even put out that song because, you know, the original song with the sample is in contention, none of the people want it was. So it's kind of like every day is a different battle, just depending on what you're dealing with, or, you know, you're going on tour and somebody gets COVID. And then you find out 3 people have COVID. and you know, it's, yeah, I couldn't, I don't even know where to start. You know, challenges everywhere.
For that record, where you have the sample that.
I want to sex you up.
So let's check offline, because I had that issue, I've had that issue 3 times, and we figured out a way to get it.
To get it done.
Yeah.
We went to them and said, well, hey, you guys out.
Yeah. There was one case we basically just had to settle it for them.
Yeah.
But then in another case, we ended up doing a legal maneuver in order to protect ourselves, so we could get the record out, while they dealt with the underlying issues.
We were talking about making like an escrow or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what
These guys are talking about business right now.
A legal
So you deal with intangibles a lot, right? Because at the end of the day, it's music for me. You can't hold it with your hand, right? And people can feel they deserve so many things. And it really starts with me personally, because I'm a manager, right? So it starts with the mentor of my artist, right? Thames is a very, very interesting artist, and I speak to her every night, not about music, but about life. How is life? How are you? How are you feeling? What have you learned? Have you eaten today? You know, it's these little things. And then you can get to like, whoever's getting clear, or touring is very difficult. I remember the first time I toured, we had no tour manager, so it was between me and my co-manager, spending our money, using all our resources, and basically we made a loss, right? I went back to Lagos in tears, literally, because we were just trying to spread the gospel in the States, and it took everything out of us. And that's when we learned, you know, we need a tour manager, right? And it varies from so many things that you can't even see coming. You can have a family member from God knows where come and tell you, oh, this is the way my daughter should. I'm like, what? Who are you? How did this happen? And it's because you're dealing with humans, and and human beings are very multifaceted. So all you need to do is just make sure you keep the main thing, and you don't get distracted by people that come to distract. Because best believe, people have come to me talking about, oh, and this when I say come to me, I mean we've agreed on something, and then it does well, and then you come back and say, actually no, we want this percentage more, and I'm like, we signed already, you know. So it can be so many different things. But yeah, it's endless.
This is a really complex business, and there are a lot of people who do not have the skills to participate in the complexity of the business, and as a result of that, there are really grave mistakes that are made that have to be unwound or renegotiated or fixed, or just you deal with the fact that you've lost a lot of money. And so that's one of my issues with the business right now, is that this is a complex business. There are very few people, for example, who understand that part of the reason why the price of music is as low as it is today, and by that I mean what artists and rights holders earn off of their streams, is because there's a supply-demand problem, right? We have an excess supply of music. There's no way that the people who are alive today could ever listen to the 700,000 songs that are dropped every week, right? And so when you have supply that is so far spread from the demand, your price point falls. And I've not been able to have this conversation with anybody. I'm not, by the way, necessarily arguing that we massively gatekeep everything, although I do think that we do need to figure out how we can better price music for working commercial artists, rights holders, right? It's a real problem. Another thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is that it wasn't the case previously that independent artists were using the same distribution vehicles as major label artists, right? But today, do-it-yourself artists, independent artists, everybody distributes music across the same platforms. And so what that means is that from the perspective of the consumer, it's not like, I'm older than I think everybody at this table, and probably most people in this room. But when I was growing up, if I wanted to buy records by independent artists, I went to indie record stores and just looked at the artwork and was like, oh, that artwork is cool. And then I used my allowance. My parents were very generous. Thank you, Dad. I used my allowance to buy like crazy random stuff to discover new music. When I wanted to listen to major label artists, I went to Tower Records, I went to H&B, I went to Virgin, I went to the bigger record stores that carried all of that stuff, and I just went through the carts digging and finding things. So the distribution is totally different, and that's creating real problems because it's so much harder for us now to find our markets than it used to be. Another challenge, I think, with social media and with Twitter and all the number of people who hold themselves out to be experts in this business who fundamentally have no idea as to how the business works is really, really high, and so that creates additional confusion. in terms of what all of us up here are trying to do, and what many of you in this room, I would anticipate, are trying to do as well. So, we need to fix the pricing mechanism on the distribution side. Music should have value. It costs us a lot of money to make it. It costs us a lot of money to market it. The idea that we almost have to pay to play sometimes, we're making gambles on our artists and on their teams. It's a really strange environment that we're in right now. Any other industry, you wouldn't be operating perpetually at a loss across each of your different verticals, right? So the fact that we have toward deficit financing, which is toward support for major league artists, means that it makes it harder for independent artists and artists who don't have that to tour successfully, because the venues are operating on the basis of, RCA, Vince Timms or Uni is going to cover the rest of this, or Rock Nation is going to cover this so that, Vic can show. But it doesn't always work that way, right? So there's all these different... I'm sorry? I was, yeah. That's why I'm in the point. You don't always get.
You don't always get what you go get. Yeah. But I think it's also interesting with this world that we live in now, because there's now platforms like Discord, where you're able to take your real niche core fans and put them into a community and actually mobilize them and monetize it as well. I think that's the other good thing about, we are moving to a theory of zero, music basically, just a marketing tool that's you're not really making money from, but you're using it as a way to create a brand and then bring people in to then create, income to a bunch of different platforms, whether it's touring or merchandise or, whatever, with Uni, she's this year we started a tour with her as a meditation tour. So a big part of everything she does, she's very holistic, she's very attuned with her spiritual side, and we were like, people are obsessed with it just because of the meditations and the sound work and everything that goes still around music, sound dance and all stuff. Let's just do a tour of just your meditations. She made more money on that tour, which was the average night was probably 75 to 100 people, than she made on her tour where the average performing night was maybe 2,000 people. Because of the ticket price difference, the brand, it's a different experience. You're getting, a lot of what shows and tours now are about selling an experience. But yeah, I think as we move to this theory of zero, where the content you're creating, you put on these platforms, especially when you're using DSPs or Netflix or online, you're just giving them content for them to create, users. You have to use that information on the back end of Spotify. I can see, the #1 city that Eek is streaming in, and it might be Adelaide, Australia. It's maybe we need to be focusing on going to Australia rather than doing a tour in America, because it might be easier to get to America, or we're losing money here. We could go to Australia, maybe do a show that's way bigger, sell way more merch, and do a collab project with a local artist. There's a lot more that you can get out of understanding the information that you're getting from these platforms, because you're not getting nearly as much money as they're getting out of you. So it's about kind of taking that information and then being like, all right, how do I navigate it to building my business, especially at the independent level, because you have so much more control at this point. When you get to the major level, you're about, I look at major label partnerships as we're going for it. Now we're no longer playing, we're no longer just feeding our niche. We want the baby to grandma to get our music, to get her, art. That's a whole different process, a whole different business. But independent level, building independent business, our chance to Mac Miller, I think when Mac went from being independent to doing his Warner deal, you also saw a global marketing campaign that you never saw with Mac Miller before, and I think it's why there's continued success on those projects today. But his core fans will tell you that Donald Trump was probably the best, one of the hugest moments in Mac Miller's career, because that identified relationship with his core market. But yeah, there's other, like you said, music is really gone to a tough place in what its value is, but what it means to people and how you're able to use the information that you get to to create these environments and put them on a Discord, have real conversations with your closest fans constantly every day, and feed them. There's never been tools like that before either, so you guys take them and do it better.
And it being in a tough place, you know, I don't want to use too much time. I can't imagine doing anything. I would never go back to practicing corporate law. I don't even think it would fit me. But this is what I'm meant to do with my life, right? So, and this is what I'm passionate about doing. I feel blessed that I get to do it. And what's really cool is that with all of the challenges that exist in the market today, there's just tremendous opportunity to build and to create and to think differently and to test things and to break even more rules. And because don't seem to be any rules, to create our own rules. So I don't take the challenges as, oh, this isn't worth it. Take the challenges. If you've read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, by the way, I highly recommend you read it. You know, like take it as an opportunity to keep building community and to keep putting one foot in front of the other, one step in front of the other every single day.
That was a whole boatload of wisdom, so thank you so much for that. If we had a little bit more time, I would have loved to follow up on that sidebar between Matthew and Vinta and hear more about legal issues that you guys have come across in your industry. But since we really only have about 5 to 10 minutes, I'll open up the floor for Q&A.